I'll open the meeting at 5:31 p.m. First of all, I'll just say hello, welcome to the second Representation Board meeting and the first of the year. I'd like to start with the acknowledgement of the traditional owners. The Curtin Student Guild pays our respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, members of our community, by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which the Bentley campus is located, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and on our Kalgoorlie campus, the Wongatha people of the Northeast Goldfields. We acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contributions they make to this university, city, and this region. In attendance, we have myself, Dylan, Razan, Rabab, Nicole. I've forgotten everyone's names. Bridget, Tom, Mitch, Cooper. I'm forgetting everyone's names. Morgan, Andrew. Others present, we have Max, Jackie, Rob, Ella, Hamida, I don't know, Nura, and Benny. Sorry. Apologies in leave of absence, I have none, and absent at the moment are Azofa and Lorian. Sorry. I'll go to if there's any disclosures of potential or perceived conflicts of interest.
I have a conflict of interest with item 9.3, as I work for APAN as per the conflict of interest register.
And that will be noted. I don't see an issue with you being in the meeting if everyone else is fine with that. I'll move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. And the motion reads that the Representation Board approves the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 12th of the 11th, 2024 and the 2nd of the 12th, 2024 as a true and accurate recording of these proceedings. I'd also like to acknowledge that Lorian is now in attendance. Someone to move that motion? Dr. Cooper?
I have a note that there's a mistake on the spelling of my name during the disclosures conflicts. There's no D in my surname.
Okay. And it's not working today, sorry. It's kind of exhausted me. I'm fine that has been noted in this and move forward with the motion. Someone to move the motion?
I'll move the motion.
Mitch and Cooper the second, I assume. All those in favour? All those against? Motion's carried. I will now move to the matters arising from the minutes, which we've had previously brought up. So I'll move now to items not for discussion. There isn't any. And public question time, there isn't any on that either. Yeah, oh, sorry. Sorry, yes. I'm very exhausted. Public question time. If there's any questions? Take that as there is no questions. It's too easy. I'll now move on to the reports and KPIs. 8.1, we have the President.
Thank you very much, Ben. Yeah, so the beginning of the 56 Guild Council has been very fast-paced, but is driven by a bunch of really dedicated representatives. I'm really proud to work alongside every week. So far, I've attended over 71 meetings, which have ranged from the commercial strategy of the Guild all the way through to the global strategy of the university. In all of these formats, I'm always advocating for the voice of students to be represented and reflected in the university. Every one of us around this table has been elected with the mandate of the students of this university to work hard every day for students. And that is what we'll do. Not Andrew, obviously, but professional staffers are formally elected with the mandate of the students of this university. And our time in these positions is limited. So I would expect that we leave nothing out on the field and always give it everything we've got. And I'm very confident in our ability to do it, to fight hard for the 60,000 students that we represent around the world. I'm happy to take the majority of my report as read, but I'll just use the opportunity to go through a few key points. One of those is something that was achieved in the last sort of day and a bit of the 55th Guild Council, the exec and the representatives that preceded us, and that is the winning of the return of the second tuition-free week, which will be coming back to the academic calendar every semester from 2026. A huge round of applause is deserved for the tireless work of many Guild reps and Guild councils before us. The academic board approved the resumption of that second tuition-free week every semester from the start of 2026 onwards. The campaign to keep that started all the way back in 2018 when Curtin proposed changing to a trimester system and introducing an 11-week summer teaching period. This proposal was defeated by the Guild back then. The university did pursue in changes to the academic calendar, however, and removed a tuition-free week from each semester back in 2021. It has had severe impacts on the students' academic experience, mental health and campus culture, as well as had adverse effects on Curtin staff who struggle to keep with their workload. We've worked really hard since 2021, so it's a lot of Guild representatives who have worked on this to lock in and secure that. A very special thanks goes to former presidents, including Dylan Boddicker and Jasmine Tweed, along with former VPE Veronica Gobber, many other Guild representatives who served on academic board, including our current acting postgraduate student president, Mitch Craig, who also worked very hard on this campaign as well. I think one of the things to reflect on is that a lot of students have been coming up to Guild representatives and really talking about how this is one of the most impactful things that the Guild has achieved throughout their university life. Not to say we haven't been doing a lot of other things, but just to say that this is actually a really big deal and it is something that we ought to celebrate as a triumph of our professional, staunch, diligent and driven theory of change that this Guild pursues. It's another win, it's another feather in our cap, and it's something that ought to be noted and represented. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to speak about that here at the representation board, because I know that it's something that might have flown under the radar considering it kind of happened just at the turnover time, but it's something that really needs to be represented. The Vice-Chancellor has initiated a review of the Student Charter, which is being led by the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic. We were quite disappointed to find out that I was the only Guild representative to be given a seat at that table, but we advocated for that to be increased, and we now have increased representation of the Guild there, including professional staff in the Student Assist Office. We've attended an initial meeting of a working group, and we've now, in the infinite wisdom of the university, established another smaller working group, which will then report back to this bigger working group. We've got an understanding from the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic that the University and the Guild will work genuinely collaboratively in the spirit of the Student Partnership Agreement on this project. The proof is obviously in the pudding on that. We're going to have to wait and see what the university seeks to pursue. And I'll report back to this board as well as Guild Council if there's any negative proposals put forward through this process. Obviously, we would not want to see those pursued and that happen. We have launched the petition demanding urgent action on unbearable heat in much of on-campus accommodation. Unilodge consistently blocks students from using portable cooling units, which leave residents with no way to escape the heat. It's not just uncomfortable, it's a serious health risk. We've got a lot of uptake on that petition already, and we'll be continuing to push for that. We've got, I think, once we include the signatures that we got yesterday on O-Day, there'll be over 700 signatures on there so far. And we'll be continuing to ramp up that campaign along with, as it starts to cool down, moving into a larger piece on student housing in general. I've been going down and speaking with students at student housing, and I'd expect that we'll be doing more programs and outreach sort of services like that, just to get a real picture of the lay of the land and put forward proposals here. Unfortunately, Curtin signed this 30-year deal with Unilodge. It's a shocking deal. Unilodge is an appalling company. So I think as part of that, we really need to be looking and pushing for that structure to be changing as well. And I just also wanted to note as well that we were proud to coordinate the delegation of student representatives to Sovereignty Day rally on January 26, which was disseminated through all WA guilds through their respective presidents. It was disappointing that other guild presidents didn't show up, and it was also disappointing to see some other student guilds put out a statement but not bother to show up as well, which was quite unfortunate. But the Curtin Student Guild was there. There was a good showing at a sign painting event on the Friday, and then on January 26, along with the NUSWA State Branch President, Rama, and the UWA's ethno-cultural officers. We provided much needed shade, cool water and sunscreen to those in attendance and assisted others with tasks such as distributing T-shirts alongside rally organisers. We've also donated a surplus of camping equipment from our 2024 Gaza Solidarity Encampment to the Noongar-led occupation to resist the Uniting Church's attempt to evict a self-sufficient Noongar women-run community support and healing service. You can keep up to date with that campaign on Instagram at Land Back for Stolen Generations. I just think, sort of in rounding out this, that it's really important that student unions be active in our broader communities and uphold the fundamental values of self-determination and lived experience in all of our work. I'll also note that it was extremely disappointing to see the Liberal Party member and Guild Councillor Coben Foster seek to make light of a statement that the Guild put out on Instagram, a statement that spoke about the appalling conditions in Banksia Hill Detention Centre. He said something along the lines of, I'm going to get on the beers or something. It's appalling. I plan on calling it out at Guild Council as well. It's not something that represents the values of the Curtin Student Guild, and I think it's quite frankly childish as well. But I'll round that out there. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Dylan. I'd also just like to acknowledge Hazafa has joined the meeting at 5:41 p.m.
That's not Huzafa, that's the WASM president that just joined.
Hello, Dylan. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, it's Nilma from Kalgoorlie has joined.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to connect with the computer, but I'm already connected. So, actually, I'm happy to be in this meeting. So I'm keen to understand and to learn about the situation of the agenda that we have for this current year, and in Kurt in general, and also in Kalgoorlie, maybe some topics that we need to address as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll now move on to the next report, which is the vice. Sorry, is there any questions for Dylan? His report. Okay. I'll now move on to the next report, which is the Vice President Education report. I am more than happy to take that as read and answer any questions. Now move on to the Vice President of Sustainability and Welfare, Zah.
I'm also happy to take it as read and happy to answer any questions at all.
Any questions? So easy. I'll now move on to Nicole's report with the Faculty of Business and Law.
I'm happy to take it as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Easy. Any questions? Okay. And now Cooper with the 5.1, which Cooper with Science and Engineering representative.
I'm also happy to take the report as read.
And yes, I'll go back to Nicole with KPIs as well, which have been submitted.
Yep, I'm happy to take it as read.
Yep. And Cooper's KPIs as well.
I'm happy to take them as read.
Move on to Rabab, whose report was not submitted and KPIs have been submitted.
Happy to take any, happy to take my KPIs as read and have any questions.
Are there any questions for Rabab? I'll now move on to Faculty of Humanities, Tom.
Yep, I'm happy to take it as read, and then I'll take any questions.
And your KPIs as well.
Yep, take it as read, and any questions.
Now move on to student assist.
Thank you. I'm happy to take the report as read. Also happy to take questions.
I will move on to the IC president, who is not in attendance at the moment, and his KPIs. Are there any questions towards that? No, any discussion? To Mitch, who we've postponed due to him just taking the position.
I think I requested to give a verbal report
Yeah.
and just postpone my KPIs. So I'll give that now. So I only started or took over the acting role on Monday last week. I have been sitting on the selection panel for the FBL Dean of Research. I have had a good O Day yesterday, had a good HDR orientation this morning. The vacancies, there's a current election, nominations are open for ISE and PSC nominations for any vacant positions that weren't filled in the election last year. There's a current review into the enrolment rules and procedures for HDR students that myself and Andrew are involved in. I think that's about it.
Are there any questions for Mitch?
What's it like to be back?
Wonderful and terrible at the same time.
Well, it's wonderful to have you back, Mitch. I'll now move on to the Queer Officer Morgan's report and KPIs.
I'm happy to take that as read. I would like to note the meeting that I have scheduled in my report for today was cancelled, and so it has been moved to a later date. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Move on to the Women's Office. Jackie?
Sorry, just confirming which meeting is that? Because the 3 last meetings are for the 21st.
It'll be a meeting under external meetings with -18.
Oh, okay, cool. And then I also had a quick question for you. I only saw this recently on Instagram, but Curtin did a reel about the updated maps. It's not Maze Maps, it's like the Curtin map. And I did notice that they were talking about bathrooms on there. So I was wondering if the data from your We All Need to Pee campaign was sent to them and if that has been included.
I'm not sure if it was sent, but I did have a look at the map and there have been no updates to the bathrooms in terms of the old gender. So nothing's been changed on the maps.
Right, so it's still like outdated.
It's still
and wrong.
the outdated
Okay,
and wrong, yeah.
cool, thank you.
Are there any more questions? Now move on to the Women's Officer report and KPIs.
I'm happy to have those as read and also answer any questions.
I'll move on to now to the Accessibility Officer's KPI and reports. Your mic's muted, Lorian.
Okay, is that better? Okay, cool. I'm happy to take that as read. I will just note that the Guide to Accessibility at Curtin University was debuted, I guess, at O-Day, and it was quite successful. I don't know exactly how many were handed out, but there was quite a few. So I think that went well. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? I'll now move on to the Higher Education Developments report. Are there any questions towards that? I'll now read the motion that the representation board notes these reports. Mitch to move, any seconds? All those in favour? Against? So we think that is carried. I'll now read the motion that the representation board approves the submitted KPIs. Anyone to move that motion? Dylan, and anyone to second? Morgan. All those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Now move to item 9, which is items for discussion and resolution. 9.1, Dutton and Metum. The motion, was there any questions towards this motion first? Oh, I'll read the motion first, sorry. 9.1, Dutton and Metum. The motion reads that the representation board condemns the refusal of the federal opposition leader Peter Dutton and state Liberal leader Libby Metum to stand in front of the Aboriginal flag if elected as Prime Minister or Premier respectively. Further to this, the representation board condemns all the major parties for not taking action necessary to adequately represent the views and aspirations of First Nations people and to close the gap. Are there any questions towards this? More than. Yep. This is moved by Razan and seconded by Tom. All those or any questions towards this first? Oh, sorry. Razan, would you like to speak towards the motion?
Yeah, I'll speak. This motion very much speaks for itself. And Dutton's track record when it comes to attitudes towards First Nations and culturally and linguistically diverse communities speaks for itself. And I echo the Human Rights Commissioner and First Nations leader, Mick Gooder's words, as behaviour that is diverse, divisive, and an attempt to disappear Indigenous people from Australian politics. My condemnation extends to the Labor Party as well. Senator Lydia Thorpe's Human Rights Amendment Bill 2023, aiming to put Australia in line with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, was blocked by both Labor and the opposition. This is considering the Australian government has already agreed to abide by this. This motion is important to the Curtin Student Guild as it is not unusual for such immature and racist behaviour to express itself in the behaviour of the general public, and if this reaches students or staff, it will be denounced as unacceptable. I'd also like to take this moment to address a concern, which Dylan has addressed as well. The role of a guild councillor, as outlined, is to set the objectives, values, and the direction of the guild. On January 20th, the Curtin Student Guild posted a statement on its social media channels headed January 26 is not a day of celebration, in alignment with the circular resolution passed by absolute majority, endorsing the rally and the self-determination of First Nations people. Campus located on stolen land should be a safe space for First Nations people, and the Guild maintains that this is an uncompromisable value. Guild councillor Coburn Foster took the time, however, to mock the statement on social media, where it was publicly viewable, commenting underneath the Guild post, "Beer's going to go down a treat." During the Operations Committee on the 10th of February, President Dylan Storer, during his verbal reports, reported positively of the Curtin Student Guild support of the Sovereignty Day rally, to which Councillor Foster scoffed. Student representatives at the Curtin Student Guild, regardless of political affiliation, in this case, Foster's affiliation with the Liberal Party, should not override the duty of the Curtin Student Guild towards its students, including First Nations students. As a Vice President of Sustainability and Welfare, such behaviour does not contribute to a safe space, and I would request that Guild councillors act both professionally and considerately.
I'll now leave it to Tom if you have something to add.
No, I think Razan covered everything I was going to say, so I'll move on to whoever's got anything to add.
I'm now happy to ask Ella.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys moved this motion. I think generally, internationally, we're seeing a growth of the far right, a growth of politics that want to, like wind back, notions that like Aboriginal people, the First Nations of this country, but also just generally kind of a trend against, poor and oppressed groups and marginalized groups, Black people in America, against migrants in, America, mass deportations by Trump against trans people and so on. And I think Donald Trump is really kind of giving Peter Dutton and like Libby Metum here in WA confidence to promote this kind of reactionary politics that's about saying, you know, oh, colonization was a good thing that happened in Australia and Aboriginal people should be grateful, you know, all that kind of crap that's spewed by the Liberal Party. And I think, you know, if Dutton wins the election, there will be a serious further backlash against, you know, Indigenous people's rights in this country, particularly like off the back of the Voice to Parliament failing. But the Labor Party particularly has just, I think, given it all a free kick. Like here in WA, you know, the Premier, Roger Cook, he dismissed the Human Rights Commission reports that, you know, talked about the abuses in Banksy Hill in Unit 18, and he said it was rubbish, like what the Human Rights Commission had to say about the horrible conditions that Aboriginal children are faced with in, you know, right like 10 minutes, 15 minutes away from this campus. And every single day in this state and in this country, Aboriginal people are abused by the police. I saw a video on Instagram yesterday of like a cop literally kicking an Aboriginal man, you know, just in broad daylight. That's the reality for Aboriginal people in this country. And as long as Labor continues to put more money, you know, into the police, into the prison system, it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. So I think, you know, Dutton is really giving confidence to that, but the Labor Party has also paved the way for that, you know, really disgusting racist reality that we're, you know, heading towards. And I think it's good that the Guild was out at Invasion Day, and also good that there's been a strong condemnation of the Liberal Party member who's a Guild councillor who just made a mockery of that and actually thinks Australia Day is a day to celebrate, which we all know it's absolutely not because of the history of this genocide in this country. And I think, yeah, it's a good motion.
Thank you, Ella. Do we have to speak on it as well?
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially like when like this year, Australia Day especially, there was a bit of a shift, like previous, you know, 5-10 years, like it's just been like Australia Day is not a day to celebrate, and like Peter Dutton especially so confidently saying like, you know, it's Australians' right to celebrate this day, shows that like there is a further you know, emboldenment of like right-wing politics, and things are just shifting to the right with Trump being in government for the second time. And I think like there's a clear like shift in public kind of opinion as well, and it's good that young people still care about, you know, not celebrating that day and care about Indigenous people in this country. It was good that there was a protest, you know, all around the country as well. And I think, yeah, especially the Guild having this motion and speaking up about Indigenous rights is very important.
Thank you for speaking, Amita. I'll now move to I'll move to the next motion, which I just had. There we go. Which is 9.2, which is oppose the LNP. The motion reads that the Representation Board denounces and condemns the recent attacks on puberty blockers by the Liberal National Party, that the Representation Board stands in solidarity with transgender people across the world facing attacks and being denied essential medical care, that the Representation Board condemns Trump's far-right transphobic agenda, including his executive order legalising that only biological sex will be recognised. As is moved by Dylan Story, I'm happy to let him speak on it first.
Yeah, look, I think we'll probably extend the first speaking rights to Benny for submitting it. I note there probably is an issue in our submission system when it comes to dead naming, so I'll apologise for that. I just noticed that there. But yeah, I'll have a few speak. Thank you. And we can amend that as well. Yeah, lovely.
Cool. Yeah, I think this is a really important motion because I think,
yeah, it's absolutely incredible that these Liberal Party attacks have come through. But yeah, so they blocked puberty blockers for under 18s, which is terrifying. This is essential healthcare for like intersex and young trans people. And yeah, it's a heinous policy from the right, which is supported by the Liberal Party, but it's also supported now recently by the Labor Party, by Mark Butler, the health minister. So yeah, it's incredibly difficult to access puberty blockers as like a young transgender person. If you're under 18, you have to go through family court and have numerous experts speak on your behalf, and all sorts of things, even to access puberty blockers. So it's not really passed out willy-nilly, even nowadays, which is, you know, it's shameful how difficult it is to access puberty blockers. But even then, it's been sanctioned. So yeah, the Queensland Liberal minister, Liberal health minister, Tim Nichols, who, you know, headed these attacks in Queensland, he boasted to be inspired by the attacks by the UK Labor Party and Sweden, or all kinds of other places in the world. So he, yeah, it's clearly part of like a global trend against transgender people and that sort of thing. And it uses the kind of the moral weight of children to justify these horrific political attacks. So, but yesterday there was an open letter from Tony Abbott and a far-right campaigner calling for an investigation of puberty blockers to be actually a national campaign, which is absolutely awful. But this wasn't just like a fringe kind of attack. It was supported by, yeah, the Labor Senator, Mark Butler, and he said that, yeah, it was calling for the investigation, no puberty blockers to be accessed across Australia until the investigation is finished. And Butler claimed that they'll be finished around mid-2026. So that's a year and a half of no puberty blockers, which is essential healthcare for young transgender people. So yeah, I think this is incredibly shameful. So yeah, it's very clear that these attacks are coming from the right, but shamefully they're even being supported by the Centre Labor Party. And yeah, I think that the Reps Board absolutely should publicly condemn this because this is terrifying, and also support the fight back. So that's why we added a note about activism and promoting future activism around this. But yeah, I'm really glad that the Guild is moving this motion because this is really, really essential. It's absolutely terrifying attacks. Yeah.
I'll give Tom an opportunity to speak now as well.
I think Dylan was meant to go first, but sure.
Apologies.
That's all good. I'm happy not to speak to this. Thanks to Betty for proposing it. Very happy to move it. We did support the recent rally that happened in Northbridge in relation to these attacks. So it's certainly in alignment with the Guild's values and the Guild's views. And it's something that we're going to have to continue to push back on. And yeah, echo that this is something that's sort of this regressive right-wing push that is attempting to be placated by the Labor Party is quite appalling, and it should have no place in this country.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. It's a purely reactionary move, and I think the Guild should stand in solidarity with trans youth at this time, especially with the risk of a federal LNP government pulling similar moves.
Yeah, I'll now move on to all those in favour of this motion. All those against? That motion is moved or carried, sorry. I'll now move to 9.3, which is Stop Ethnic Cleansing Gaza. And the motion reads that the Representation Board condemns the US President Donald Trump's explicit endorsement of ethnic cleansing in Gaza and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's promise to continue committing genocide in the territory. And then 2, endorse the Australian Palestinian Advocacy Network's list of urgent actions that the Australian government must take in response, which is 1, publicly condemn these statements and demand accountability from both Trump and Netanyahu for their incitement of violence and war crimes. 2, demand the permanence of the current ceasefire. 3, cut all military and economic ties to Israel that enables its illegal occupation and apartheid and genocide in the occupied Palestinian territory. 4, impose sanctions on Israel for its genocide, illegal occupation and apartheid. And then 5, expose the Israeli ambassador and use of Australia's diplomatic channels to pressure the US to halt the violence and illegal agenda and work with the international community and the UN to pursue Palestinian rights, sovereignty and self-determination. And then 3, endorse the student strike the Australian organised on February 27th by Students for Palestine and the National Union of Students National Day of Action on March 26th. I do not have who submitted this, but Zahn moved. Would you be happy to speak on this?
Yeah, so genocide, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid is enshrined in Israeli policy. That's just reflected in its prime minister's actions, so it's nothing really new. But self-determination is at the heart of what the Curtin Student Guild advocates for. For this reason, echoed by President Dylan Storer, projects and campaigns on Palestine are conducted closely with the Palestinian community, not just including myself as a Palestinian, but also with Palestinian-led organizations such as APAN. And the Curtin Student Guild maintains our commitment to the BDS guidelines and supports APAN's list of urgent actions that the Australian government must take. While Students for Palestine isn't Palestinian-run or a Palestinian-led organization, I respect its messaging on the strike and moving the motion for this purpose.
Dylan, would you like to speak on that as well as the seconder?
I think I just echo what Razan has said. Obviously, the Curtin Student Guild has taken a strong stand on these issues for many years now, and in particular over the last few years on the sort of increasing of the genocide that's been perpetrated by Israel for many decades now. The pace of that has come up. Obviously, what Donald Trump said is appalling, to suggest the entire ethnic cleansing of a people out of a region, yet it is in alignment with the views and sort of aspirations of many people within the Israeli government as well. And it's really shocking, I think, that the Australian government hasn't stepped up to the plate to protect international law. It's not really shocking, actually, but it's very much disappointing. Australia is a country, we've just sent $800 million to the United States for some nuclear submarines. We're trying to, keep Trump happy with us, whilst he's going around now saying that he wants to have some kind of, the complete colonisation of Gaza. He's talking about economic colonisation of Ukraine now. He's talking about taking over Greenland and Canada. It's just ridiculous. And we're sitting here and we've got a government that's like, oh, I'm meeting today with these people and we're having very important discussions with Marco Rubio and all of this. It's ridiculous. And we can't continue to pretend and act like the United States is acting like a nice, respectable country anymore, because it really isn't. It hasn't for a very long time, but in particular, this has just made it like so much more blatant for us to see, in the fact that we're acting as if everything's the same and everything's normal. It just seems to be ridiculous.
Dylan, is there anyone else that would like to speak to this motion?
Yeah, I'm glad that the Guild is moving this motion, because the situation in Palestine is really horrific. Despite the ceasefire, there's been over 100 Palestinians killed in Gaza since the ceasefire. I was reading the other day, apparently, Israel has arrested more people in the West Bank since the ceasefire than the prisoners they've released, which is, horrifying. The military checkpoints in the West Bank has increased in the past year. So, the suffering of Palestinians is far from over, despite the ceasefire that's been agreed upon. And, this genocide, as Amnesty International defines it, this genocide is absolutely horrific, and we should do everything we can to, fight against it. And like you've mentioned, fight against our own leaders as well, because Albanese has refused to comment on Trump's what Trump said about Gaza and ethnically cleansing Gaza. And Penny Wong is, more than happy to work with Trump. So I think, it is, our responsibility to take a stand against our own leaders. And I'm glad the Guild is putting forward this motion.
Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to the motion? The first.
Yeah, I think it's really concerning, especially like the type of censorship we're seeing around the country, just on, a Palestine flag being displayed on an artwork. Like, it's just like really horrible, actually, that, Palestinian flags covered in this like exhibition at National Gallery of Australia. Like, it's really appalling. And this comes, this isn't the only thing that happened recently. It's like just piling up list of things that are going on around the country where another similar thing happened with Creative Australia, where they, just dropped representing like this artist in Venice Biennale. And his artwork didn't even have anything offensive. It was like also just like from 2007, the problematic artwork was from. And people should be able to freely, make art about anything. And it's total just like, it just shows what things are going backwards in this country. And yeah, this motion is especially important, and that it endorses the student strike, because like, supporting Palestine should not be censored. It should not be like something people can't speak about in this country, especially, students as well. And yeah, I think it'll be really good if the Guild could put up posters of the student strike as well, so that students can know about it and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it's really good that this motion, is getting posted.
Ellen?
Repeat a bunch of stuff, but if the Guild could put up posters for it in the poster slots, that'd be helpful so we can reach more students. Because I think like a lot of students, like, they are angry about what they're seeing, but a lot of people I talk to just don't know what to do about it, and don't think we can do anything about it. They also don't really know much about Curtin's connections to weapons companies, which I think we should continue to promote and publicise. But yeah, if the Guild could put up posters in the Guild's poster slots next week, that'd be helpful. I can send the poster to the Guild email.
Is there any more questions before I move to? All those in favour of this motion? Those against? The motion is carried. I'll now move to 9.4, which is Unilodge Heat, and the motion reads that the Representation Board calls upon Curtin University and its accommodation partner Unilodge to cease blocking students from using portable air conditioners in non-air conditioned on-campus student accommodation, and to commit to urgently installing permanent air conditioning into currently non-air conditioned units. Mitch, would you like to speak on this? As the mover?
I mean, unless Dylan wants to go first. So, I mean, this is not a new issue. So I've been speaking to quite a few students who I know who live or have lived in student accommodation. And the reasoning they're giving is just insane for why they can't have portable air conditioners. They're saying the power boards can't handle it. They're saying that the 5-volt USB evaporative water coolers are a water hazard. Like, somehow they're more dangerous than a glass of water. Like, even though they have 1500 watt heaters in their rooms, they're saying that you can't have a less than 1500 watt air conditioner because it's too much for the power. And they're saying they're doing all this. You can't even have a USB powered air conditioner. It's crazy. And it goes back, like, I know of people during COVID, people who lived in air-conditioned units got moved to Vickery House in 40-degree weather with a fever with no cooling, and they literally had to lie in a wet towel to stay cool. Like, it's absolutely horrendous conditions during heat waves, and they really need air conditioning, and it's really important. It's decent living conditions are a basic human right and should be guaranteed and shouldn't be withheld from students and young people. And it's not just about the conditions, also bad, living conditions affect people's studies, their results, their ability to complete their units and actually do their studies here at Curtin. And it's a really important issue. And as far as I know, we're up to about 700 signatures so far on the petition, and I'm sure that Dylan would love to talk about what else we're doing with the campaign. So that's it from me.
Dylan?
Yeah, look, I mean, Unilodge treats residents appallingly in their accommodation. I spoke to it a little bit earlier in the President's report section, but this is going to be a big focus of the Guild this year, and I think rightfully so. It's gone on for too long. It is a situation where, and it goes beyond just cooling the accommodation and cooling these sort of unair-conditioned rooms, and it goes into sort of a larger piece around safety at Unilodge, security at Unilodge. It goes into also just in some of the conversations I've been having with people when it comes down to discrimination from staff of Unilodge towards residents. This will also be affecting international students as well. Like, it's just a pretty shocking operation they seem to be running, and they're running it with what seems to be little to no oversight from Curtin University. So it's not just about us holding Unilodge to account, it's also about us ensuring that the university actually takes this seriously. I've had some mixed responses from people in the university depending at the level and how close they are to accommodation. Some people seem to think, oh, it's all too hard. Well, quite frankly, it's just ridiculous. It's not too hard. These are students that are paying thousands of dollars a year to live in student accommodation. It's not affordable accommodation to start with. Once you put aside if you've got a student on youth allowance, I think you've got something like $20 a week to spend after you pay for rent. Like, it's not affordable accommodation. And quite frankly, it's price gouging already because we're in a housing and cost of living crisis for bare minimum. The facilities are not up to scratch. The services that are provided by Unilodge, everyone pays a services fee, everyone pays a facilities fee. It's not up for scratch. Something gets broken, it takes months to repair. Students out there are angry. They're happy to see the Guild is engaging in this, but I do think that whilst this is the first part of putting Unilodge on notice, and it's something that students really said, we really want to see you take some action about this because we're sweltering, we're hot right now. It's not going to be the only thing. We're going to be having more conversations with students living in accommodation, particularly older accommodation, but some of these issues exist in the flasher accommodation up there as well. We'll be continuing to do that and really push for change in this area, and we'll do what it takes to get some wins in this area because, quite frankly, nothing in these accommodations have really changed for decades and decades apart from the rent, and it's just not good enough, and it needs to stop.
Thank you, Dylan. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak to this motion? Nicole, sorry, yes. Apologies.
I completely agree with what Dylan and Mitch said. I have nothing else to add to it.
Thank you. I'll now move to Lorian, I believe. Wants to speak to it?
Cool. So I think there's a couple things that are worth noting. Firstly, in the context of heat and heat waves, with climate change, Perth is becoming hotter and drier and will continue to do so. So this is already a dangerous issue but it's only going to get more dangerous with every year that Uni Lodge and Curtin refuse to take action on it. Heat waves are one of the most, or they are the most deadly natural disaster in Australia, even more so than bushfires, floods combined. And I think it's worth noting as well that heat waves and heat is particularly dangerous for people with disabilities. So as well as this being an issue for sort of well-being, it is also a genuine health risk to students and especially disabled students.
Thank you, Lauren. Rob?
I think it's incredibly disgraceful that the university and Uni Lodge are kind of treating students like this. Basically, I'm just trying to cut costs wherever possible, just chuck students in the most kind of poorer, poorly kind of maintained kind of places to live, especially international students, who of course, have to live on campus more often than other students. Like on top of the kind of extraordinary prices they're already paying, the kind of immense pressure they're under to kind of study. I think international students are incredibly oppressed at this university. I think the Guild, should obviously be doing everything it can to kind of fight for them, and this is one incredibly important kind of part of that. I agree with Dylan's comments about the cost of living. This clearly is a key kind of cost of living issue for many students on campus. I'd like to see, the Guild kind of do similar actions like this around other kind of cost of living issues, right? If this is successful, maybe running similar campaigns on other kind of cost of living issues should be something the Guild should do in future. Clearly, this is something that every single person kind of experiences to some degree or another, and everyone wants to see some real action on. I think it's a really great kind of thing,
Thank you, Rob. Any Max?
So heat, especially in the Perth summer, where it's recorded as the hottest place in the world for quite a while now, it brings more issues than just temperature, than just heat. Heat stress, strong heat stress starts at around 32 degrees core body temperature. When we regularly experience 40 plus degree days in Perth, it brings genuine health issues, concerns, serious injuries and hospitalization risks. In addition, this is another issue that Uni Lodge accommodation also sees a lot, which is mold growth. Having unhealthy temperatures like that, it promotes unhealthy living environments, which also increases health risks for all Uni Lodge residents. This is something that I've had people, friends in student accommodation have spoken to me about this. It gets bad in the summer, especially bad. Glad to see the campaign's kicking off well. I've personally signed the petition, has shared it with everyone I know, people who already graduated or alumni, they've all signed it once I've shared it to them. So happy to see this grow and hoping it gets pushed further.
Thank you, Max. I'll now move to all those in favour of this motion. All those against? Motion is carried. I'll now move to item 9.5, which is the NUS conference reports, and all of those are submitted by Dylan, Callum, Hazaifa, Bridget, Noor, Veronica, Emily, and Hamida. And the motion reads that the representation board notes the NUS conference report delegates and accredited observer reports. Do I have someone to move that motion? Or sorry, would anyone like to speak on this motion first? Could I have someone to move this motion? Dylan? Anyone to second? Bridget, all those in favour? Against? That motion is carried. I'll now move on to item 9.6, which is the National Union of Students KPIs. And the motion reads that the Representation Board recommends to Guild Council the approval of the 2025 National Union of Students Key Performance Indicators and Initial Affiliations. This is moved by Dylan. I'll let you speak on it.
Each year the Curtin Student Guild affiliates to the National Union of Students. The key performance indicators guide the final affiliation amount that we're going to be paying to the NUS. The KPI assessment is done to ensure that our significant contribution of student funds has been satisfactory for Curtin students, that the NUS is functioning effectively and transparency. The Curtin Student Guild has consistently, strongly supported a powerful and active national union and believes that KPIs are important in ensuring that all students reap the benefits of the Guild's NUS accreditation. In terms of what I have proposed here, I've proposed that the initial affiliation amount be $40,000. This is $10,000 less than it was last year. I think that is appropriate given that last year we only ended up paying around $30,000 anyway. So frankly, there's a lot of room for the National Union to be improving upon the KPIs, and if they do it, we will actually end up paying them more than we paid them last year anyway. Last year was also a different kettle of fish because we were also hosting EdCon, which universally was loved by everyone, I'm sure. I've also increased some of the penalties for some things in here, putting up for completion here. So that includes things like ensuring that reports are up on the website within 1 week of national executive meetings, ensuring that paid office bearers meet with equivalent office bearers at least once a year here at Curtin University, ensuring that the NUS provides updates on actions and campaigns, engages member organisations. The NUS establish a policy platform that provides member organisations with a clear statement on NUS beliefs, values and programs, and that on balance the NUS has made substantial progress towards the achievements of its stated policy goals. All around, I believe, the words of the KPIs have remained the same. It's what we've put forward for the past few years. The fact is that over the past few years, there are some KPIs that have been repeatedly not met. So I think we've got to increase the pressure for that KPI to be met to have the national union that we demand and require. There is also some budgetary reasoning for that. We've got one budget line in our budget for national affiliation that has $50,000 in it. Last year we had $50,000 down as the initial affiliation rate to the NUS. But we also need to take into account other affiliations that we have as well, including the Council of Australian Postgraduate Associations, which will also require a slice of that pie in terms of affiliation as well. So there's only a limited amount of money. Frankly, the NUS is a failure at the moment. If I had to give them a scorecard, there's a whole year for them to improve upon, and if they do it, there's $40,000 for them. If not, we'll make the relevant deductions and apply for a fee exemption and see where we go. But this is basically the level of pressure that we need to put on as the Curtin Student Guild to make sure the national union is actually operating in the interests of Curtin students.
Thank you, Dylan. Bridget, would you like to speak on this as well?
I don't really have much to add. Hopefully one day the NUS will be an effective voice for students instead of being an absolute labour fest.
Would anyone else like to speak on this motion? Mitch?
Yeah, I just got a couple things. I know I pointed this out to Dylan earlier, but it's still an error. It's still an error. It's that it says for KPI number 7, it just says the same thing as in the deadline box. It should be about the minutes from the national conference. There we go. And the other thing is, so I had the displeasure of working on NatCon with the GenSec last year, of the NUS GenSec last year. And yeah, it was a shambles. There was a lot of issues that, things that they said they were going to do that they go, oh, we didn't do it. Can you organise something? And a lot of stuff have to happen very last minute that they said they were going to take care of. there's all sorts of things. Like there was a very little communication last year with our office bearers, and you know, like they could do so many more campaigns. They could support students so much better, and they really need a push to perform better, to do more, to actually use the power that they have as the national representative body for post-secondary students to actually affect some real change rather than just yelling at each other. So I think this is really good to increase some of these penalties.
Rob?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like I do want to point out that, you know, the Curtin Guild has proposed to reduce funding for NUS for 2 years running now, which is something to keep in mind. I mean, like personally, like I would reiterate some of the arguments that our team made last year when this was proposed then, as well. You know, basically, I just don't think necessarily reducing funding to NUS is the best way to solve these issues. You know, I mean, I just think the main problem of NUS, as people have kind of alluded to, is a political problem. The problem is that NUS is run by Labor students of both factions, left and right, who have just totally refused to, you know, work with other factions and run kind of real important campaigns that actually kind of fight for students' rights. I think NUS is kind of being reduced to kind of, you know, factional kind of fighting, not by people kind of demanding that they do more progressive campaigns, or rather by Labor students who are kind of refusing to go along with those and refusing to kind of criticize the Labor government. And I think the kind of key way to you know, fix the NUS would be to stop those students from having so much power, and to have a activist outlook that kind of seeks to you know, fight for students' rights and that kind of thing. And I don't necessarily think that reducing funding to it is the solution that would be best. But I'll leave it there.
Nick Rob, leave any final thoughts on this? Bentley first, yes.
Yeah, I also think like we're going into a potential like Peter Dutton, you know, prime ministership and a Liberal Party prime ministership where there'll be, you know, increased attacks on student rights and that sort of thing. So I think it's really important in the current context, not that, you know, Labor is lovely for student rights, but I think in the current context, it's actually important to put as much funding as possible into a union body that protects students. I mean, we're all the most important thing right now is, you know, we've been talking about how there's been attacks on students, we've been talking about housing and that sort of thing, we've been talking about, you know, Palestine and like Palestinian students and that sort of thing, and there'll be so many attacks on Palestine, on student housing, on housing in general, we were talking about international students, there'll be massive attacks on international students. These are all campaigns that the National Union of Students should be fighting for. And if you're reducing funding and reducing their power to fight back, I think that that's not really that you know, great. I think, yeah, we've been talking about important ways to things that are wrong in the world that the NUS could be fighting for this whole time, that the Student Guild has pledged to be fighting for. But why would we reduce the funding to a body that can do exactly that alongside us? Yeah, I just think that's kind of a bit illogical.
Jackie, would you like to respond to that?
I would also like to highlight the role of Socialist Alternative in the NUS in making it a not only toxic but also a very threatening environment. In my time at NUS, Socialist Alternative did not give anything to debate in the whole like 4 days that we were there, and essentially just made it like an absolute crap show. And I think it is ridiculous that people think that we should be putting more funding into essentially a broken system. And yeah.
Jack, I'll let you respond as well. Oh, responding to Bridget's comment.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's just having a stronger NUS is in the interest of all of us, like all students. And I think, yeah, I take some of the criticism about the stuff NUS has done or like hasn't been able to do, and it has been disorganized in many ways as well. But I think having a stronger NUS would be in the interest of all students around the country and including Curtin as well. So I think we should continue, you know, working and trying to, yeah, make NUS better, make NUS, you know, actually fight for students' rights and have successful campaigns, especially if there is another round of education cuts, which we've been seeing at other parts of the country. And I'm not sure if cutting funding or not cutting funding is going to really do a major shift, but I think there needs to be more communication, more like open working and kind of, you know, like having campaigns nationally that Curtin is a part of. I think Curtin should be a part of, you know, NUS and work together because that would be in the interest of all students.
Jackie.
Yeah, I do agree with that point. I do think we need a strong NUS, but I think we need a strong NUS that delivers. There's been this year-on-year trend of them not delivering. They're continuously not meeting their KPIs. And I think it's important to note that while we are proposing on reducing funding, it's still 5K above what we ended up paying them anyway. And I think we need to send that very clear message of it doesn't matter if you're SALT, if you're Labor left, Labor right, you need to be working cohesively together as the represented voice of students, and you need to be delivering on your promises. And I think that while, you know, it does suck that we're, you know, proposing to cut funding, it's for a reason. We're not doing it willy-nilly. We're doing it to send that clear message of you guys need to pull your socks up and fucking do something, because at the moment you're just getting paid, not doing and not actually achieving much. So yeah.
Dylan.
Yeah, look, it's I think we're in a tricky situation here, and I've been reminded that I ought to have declared that I've got a conflict here. I don't really foresee it as being a conflict, but I'm the state branch president for the NUS this year. So there you go. I apologise profusely, and I ask for your forgiveness, dear representation board, for forgetting that. And I'd like to thank the acting postgraduate student committee president, Mitchell Craig, for sending me a text message right there being like, actually, but anyway, back to the point at hand. The Curtin Student Guild firmly believes in the NUS, and I think that if the NUS does what the bare minimum is, there will be an increase in funding to the NUS this year, and then we're having a different conversation. I think I think if the NUS was conducted in the way that sort of opposition and different voices are heard in this representation chamber, with the tone and respect that we have here at Curtin. And I know that that's not every reps board meeting. I know it's the start of the year, and I know election time will come around and everything will get a little bit more heated. But if this was conducted like this every year, I think we'd be in a hell of a different position. But I'm not ready to give increased funding to a union that's run by the right faction of the Labor Party. I'm not ready to give funding to a union that has in its policy book pro-AUKUS policy. I'm not ready to have in a union a faction that's run by a faction that voted against our motion regarding Banksia Hill. I'm not ready to increase funding to a union that's run by a faction that had delegates on conference floor talk about the benefits of nuclear power and say, drill, baby, drill. So I'm not ready to increase funding to a union that has that is controlled by what I think is quite a right-wing and regressive, rather, faction. So I think that it's something that we can work together on as broadly left-wing students to bring this kind of tone of debate to the table, to actually hold the right wing of the Labor Party accountable. It's the faction that controls the union, hold them accountable to deliver for students, and then I think we're actually in a different situation. Yeah, I think it would be really good for factions like Socialist Alternative to not sign these, and Labor Left, NLS and New South Wales Labor Students and whatever stupid other factions they've got in their ridiculous splitting and infighting and backstabbing that they've got going on over there over East. Hello, if everyone's listening online. They won't be. They don't care. But I think that this is the kind of conversation that needs to be having. Everyone signs these deals at this conference with the right faction of the Labor Party. They didn't actually control the conference this year, but because there are all these deals signed, they've got an overwhelming majority on exec. And so they actually control the union. So I think that there's a way that actually if every faction was able to swallow a little bit of pride, work together and actually maintain that this is a left-wing union, here is a common program that we can work on and we can push forward, hell of a different conversation. And I'd welcome the increase in funding when the NUS is actually that fighting force that it needs to be. But I'm not prepared to increase funding to a union that's run by the regressive right of the Labor Party.
Mitchell, Craig.
I just want to contrast that with, the another national union for students, but not the NUS, is the Council of Australian Postgraduate Associations. I'll also note that I'm a member of their board. But in contrast to the NUS, so for a long time, CAPA was not factionalised at all, had no factions, everyone just worked together to represent students. And then a few years ago, someone decided to factionalise it and it fell apart, became dysfunctional, stopped doing anything. There was disputed elections and all sorts of stuff. And recently, there's no longer factions in CAPA now, and it started to actually do stuff and actually function again and, giving Senate submissions, pre-budget submissions, working on campaigns for increases to stipend rates, things like that. And it's actually starting to be an effective union again. And the difference is the factionalisation. And without factionalisation, I think the NUS would run a hell of a lot better. I don't think it's going to stop being factionalised anytime soon. But part of the dysfunction is the infighting and the backstabbing between the factions.
Thank you, Mitch. That is it for speaking onto this motion. I'm more than happy to move on now to all those in favour of this motion. All those against? Motion is carried. I'll move on to item 10, which is general business. Yep, Dylan.
We unfortunately have got a little bit of correspondence. It's more a Guild Council matter. I'll just update everyone here on it as well. That for the last several years, we will be. Hold on. For the last few years, the Guild's received a $20,000 grant from the university to support club events on campus. And this has been indicated by the new interim chief operating officer of the university that this funding will not be continued this year. I wanted to mention it here because it's something that is quite important to us to continue to support clubs and societies here at the university. $20,000 is cents on the dollar to the university. The reasoning given to us is that there's a tightening in international student numbers, which is maybe true in other universities, but isn't actually the case here at Curtin University. I don't know if the chief operating officer of this university knows, but I meet regularly with the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Global, and Curtin seems to have weathered the storm quite well in this regard. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that here. If anyone's paying any attention, that this will be something that we'll continue to push for and push for club support. We know that we've got quite a thriving club environment here at Curtin University. It's something that needs to be protected, and it's something that gives a lot of space for students to express themselves, feel represented, and it's also a good way for students to contribute to the university. So it's something that I note with a bit of disappointment at the moment. But yeah, I don't know if anyone had any questions on that generally at the moment, but that's where we're up to at the moment. Hopefully we'll get that back and we'll be able to push for that to be put back in place and hopefully increase. But yeah, that's quite telling. So yeah, we'll see how we go. A lot of student experience is actually determined out of that Chief Operating Officer office. And this is a disappointing first act coming out of that Chief Operating Officer's office. And we're going to work to see whether we can fix this. But I would hate to see this same attitude come towards things like student parking and come towards things like other fees and charges on campus. And it's something that we've got to be ready to stand against if that comes up. And that increasing corporatisation of the university and this money sort of counting method of the university, or actually the university exists to invest in students, and that should be the first and foremost mission of the university. So this may just be a one-off thing, or it may be the first of many regressive changes that are being put through that office, but I'll keep you updated.
Is there anything else for Alex? Questions by Max?
Yeah, a few questions for Dylan. You said this was the interim chief financial officer?
Chief Operating Officer.
Chief Operating Officer. Do you have any idea of when Curtin University will decide on someone more permanent for this position?
I'm unsure. It will be this year. I think I don't know exactly the timeline, but I think it would be towards the middle of the year is when they're looking at advertising for a permanent position.
And follow up, is there anything clubs can do to help support the guild in the push for this funding? A lot of clubs, ours included, do rely on this funding to provide on-campus events for our members and for the general student population. And it is something that, it fosters a connection, it helps build friendships, and it helps build lifelong, this type of networking that, people go on to enjoy and use for the rest of their lives. So is there anything that we could do to support the guild in this fight?
Yeah, I think so. We got word of this late on Friday last week, and then we've been caught up with O Week this week. So I am meeting next week with the Vice-Chancellor and the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, and I'll be bringing it up in those meetings. We'll see where we go. If the tone of those meetings is positive, maybe there won't need to be an escalation in this. If the tone of those meetings is negative, then I think it will be a case of us needing to get clubs on board to ensure that that funding continues, because it is quite important, and it ranges in a variety of different events. From social events to more networking kind of events to hackathons and all of the variety of different things that have been funded through this grant over the last few years. It's been in place. Yeah, it's quite disappointing to see as well sort of the fact that we've got an increase in student services fees by the fact that international students are now paying student services fees, and we've got 50% of that is being quoted as one of the reasons why this is being cut, which is also disappointing. Members here, this is an issue that happens every time there's a meeting in this room, whether it's the guild meetings or any university meeting, the amount of times you see like these senior execs from the university sit here and then that happens. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, one day we might have a meeting room that works, but we can hope. Hopefully they'll put that $20,000 towards this or so. I don't know. Like, it's just ridiculous. Anyway, what was the question? Yeah, Mitch, I'm happy to stop yapping.
I was just going to chime in that there is a council chamber refurbishment program approved. It was approved in 2022 and scheduled to be done in 2023. It is now 2025, and it's insane that it's still. We had like architects and sound engineers visiting academic board and asking Dylan Bodiker exactly what we needed for guild meetings back in 2023, and they haven't done anything.
Okay.
I'll move on to any final general business at all. Okay, none. I'll move on to the meeting evaluation, which has been missed by myself. That will happen again. That will be rectified. And then item 12, which is the next meeting, which will be sent out. The notice of the next meeting will be sent out via electronic email at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting by myself or the minute taker, sorry. Right, thank you. I now close this meeting at 6:52 p.m.